Ladies and gentlemen, after finally having completed all of Scarlet Nexus, I guess technically on one character since there's two main storylines, I wanted to put together my final thoughts of the game after having finished it, and just kind of where my head is at and what the experience was like. And if you're someone that really enjoys this, then you'll be able to kind of at least use my opinion as a point of reference. On screen, I'll be showing you the opening minutes of the game. I believe that this is a story game, which means there are any thoughts or impressions. I don't want to give you any spoilers. So this is just going to be, as the game opens, you'll see some cutscenes, a little bit of tutorial action, things like that. So I'll be talking about some of the end game stuff from a general perspective, but I won't be showing you anything from later in the game if you really want to just play it for yourself. So let's go ahead and jump into it. Let's talk about my thoughts and experiences with Scarlet Nexus. Scarlet Nexus is a action RPG. It's got a little bit of the Souls-like combat in it, where it's very committed, but it's very action oriented. I would call it, from gameplay perspective, probably a cross between more like the Devil May Cry series, and then with some of the Souls-like combat where you have to commit to it. There's some really cool interactions, and I think visually the game is gorgeous. You'll use the opportunity to have melee weapons or ranged weapons depending on which character you play through, and there's going to be some really fast combat that feels very action heavy and fun and satisfying. There's also some really interesting kind of cutscene quick time event things that you'll get. You do have the ability to pick up objects and throw them, so you'll be throwing cars at your enemies and stone blocks, and I think the telekinesis is actually pretty cool. It's pretty awesome to just be able to pick things up and throw them and weave that into your combat. The core of the combat is switching between your telekinesis and your melee weapon or your ranged weapon if you're playing Kasane. So they actually blended it pretty well together, where if you do a melee combo into telekinesis, then you'll be able to pull yourself back. It's almost like it weaves into the combo and moves you away from danger. You throw the object at them and then you can jump back in, and you're weaving those together to get combo points. You have HP bar, that's about it. You have a little mana bar that allows you to use your telekinesis, or psychokinesis, what they call it. So you'll be able to kind of just pick things up and throw it with that power meter. Later on, you unlock two other states, which are like temporary states that you empower yourself with. The first one is Brain Drive. When Brain Drive, it's a meter that fills up on its own, and when it activates, you have increased power, both with your attacks, but also your meter is stronger and you're able to use more powers more flagrantly. It feels really good because you have a skill tree that allows you to unlock passives for the Brain Drive. So you get, when Brain Drive activates, it like fully charges your psychokinesis bar. You get benefits from it, stats, bonuses from it. It feels really good. The one thing I didn't like about Brain Drive, and one of the reasons why I'm kind of confused as to why they did it this way, Brain Drive doesn't activate by input. As soon as the bar is full, it will activate Brain Drive regardless. And you fill your Brain Drive by throwing psychokinesis and landing attacks. So very much like the Gnar effect, if you guys play League of Legends, where it kind of triggers on its own. Sometimes it can trigger at a time that's very unfortunate. And I definitely had this happen a lot in the game, where my Brain Drive would activate as I was finishing an encounter. And then I would just spend the next, minute and a half running to the next encounter in Brain Drive, which is a duration-based thing, expending it and not getting any benefit from it because it kind of goes on its own. Now, I can theorize, I guess, or speculate as to why they did this. Is they have a secondary power-up mode, which is your Brain Field. This has an input. I was using a PS4 controller where you push in both analog sticks and it activates Brain Field. And this one is super limited. I think max you could be in it for 30 seconds. And this gives you free reign on your psychokinesis. It has a brand new effect on the screen. It zones out all the environment assets and puts you in a whole new arena. It changes your character visuals, and there's camera effects and things like that. And it looks really cool. So I'm wondering if maybe they just ran out of inputs. It didn't seem like there was other keybinds they could have used to allow you to activate Brain Drive, so maybe not. But yeah, it definitely felt kind of weird to have Brain Drive trigger on its own. And there's times where I wish it just didn't go off when it did. And then Brain Field felt okay. It allowed you to really like slam people with psychokinesis. You can pick up multiple objects. You could even hold down the L2 on PS4 and pick up a whole bunch of objects at once and then launch them all at once at the enemy, which felt pretty good. But I think as far as how often you use it and what it was used for, I think Brain Drive was more effective and more exciting, the one that triggers on its own. And then Brainfield was kind of cool and more story thematic, because as you use it, it strains your brain really hard, and then your character starts talking like an evil person because they're channeling the wrong power and things like that. So it's pretty cool. It didn't detract from the experience. It just, I felt like it could have been implemented a little bit better, and could have been used a little bit more effectively to kind of enrich your gameplay as you're going through the game. Next, let's talk about probably the biggest critique of the game that you'll probably hear from people that played it. There's going to be the subset of audience that really likes these kinds of games, which are very story heavy, very character driven and world driven. And then the people that really played it for the action, their biggest gripe was that it was very cutscene heavy. What they wanted to do, they coincided the launch of this game with the launch of an anime that's in the same universe. So there's Scarlet Nexus the game, and there's Scarlet Nexus the anime, and they're already starting with episodes and pushing that along. So in the game, and I think this just makes it so you want to go watch the anime, there's a lot of character development. And they did this kind of like a manga comic book style, where you have an image of the two characters talking, and it is voice acted, but it's not a cutscene in that way. It's more just like you're listening to them talk, and it goes through image and image, and it's kind of like a manga in that way. But it was a lot. You can probably, I would say the game from start to finish is probably about 18 to 20 hours for one of the main stories. If you want to play through on the other one, it's about the same. And if you ended up watching all of the cutscenes and all of they're called Bond episodes, which is just like, fun little, hey, let's go out and go to the mall and buy clothes and whatever, so you can kind of get to know the characters. I think that was also probably another 10 to 15 hours of just that, right? Just side cutscenes and character development. So it's pretty excessive if it's not something you're into. There's a lot to get through, and I watched most of it. Some of them I skipped, but I watched most of it just so the people that watch the playthrough on YouTube, if they're into that, they can watch it. I enjoyed some of them. Some of them were pretty cool and interesting, and the character development was interesting, but it definitely was a lot. You would spend maybe, I think it's at its worst, 10 to 15 minutes without putting your hand on the controller. You're just watching cutscenes and listening to characters talk, right? So it's just very long. But other than that, I think the gameplay was really solid, visually very cool, and the combat was satisfying, and overall, I really enjoyed the playthrough. There was definitely a good amount of reuse for environments, and I think no matter what, you're always going to have this in a kind of premium title, purchase title like this. They want to get as much value out of every asset they make. And it didn't bother me too much. There was just maybe points of the story, like when you're 30% of the way through, you're going through the same environments over and over and over and over. It kind of went away as you went to new environments and new biomes, and the points of interest changed, so that was cool. But there was a couple points where I needed to get like my third cup of coffee for the day, because it was the same enemies in the same environment for like 6 hours straight, and it was just getting kind of monotonous. But that kind of cleaned itself up later as you go to a different biome. I just think that they probably could have either added a new section to that environment that felt different with new enemies, or just cut part of that and shorten it a little bit, because it did feel a little excessive when you're kind of going through the same city with the same units. And it probably would have benefited from the whole game long to add maybe, 25 to 40% more enemies, because it got very a little repetitive with the types of enemies you fight. Oftentimes, even in like the late stages of the game, you're still fighting the same enemies that you fought when the game started. They're just scaled up, so it just, you get a lot of sameness from that. And again, it might just be a cost efficiency thing. They made those assets, they animated them, they did the quality assurance, and everything worked, so they wanted to keep it. So that kind of makes sense. Game design wise, there was a couple encounters that I felt could have been polished a little better from a game design perspective. There were some boss encounters where all the boss did was shoot projectiles in copious amounts. The projectiles were very fast and hard to react to, and they were doing it for long periods of time. So you'd get like 10, 15 seconds of nonstop projectiles, and without powers, they were unavoidable. And if you got hit by one, you would then get hit by the next 16 projectiles that came, which always, it just felt kind of, to me, I look at that, and maybe it's just a personal perspective, but I look at that as kind of the wrong kind of difficulty. It doesn't feel like it's me versus myself and I'm screwing up. It's more like me versus the game, and the game is just doing things that are kind of irritating. But there were also boss encounters that were fantastic. The final boss and one of the bosses before it, very satisfying, really interesting. And then when you get your powers kind of working together, it's awesome. So I think there's a lot of good in this game. I'm just kind of picking apart the few parts that really bothered me. And on that note, there is kind of, I'm not sure what they would do about it. So the way the system works is you have these teammates that are in your party. You can choose who goes in your party, and they play with you, right? They run around almost like Star Ocean, right? Where they're with you, AI driven, and they're fighting with you and doing things. And then if they're in your party, you can borrow their power, because the story of the game is that everyone's linked through this nexus where people can kind of use brain powers together and use all kinds of crazy powers. So you have this kind of like 4-button grid where you get four party members at max, where you can activate their power, it recharges. And then as you bond with them more and you get closer to that party member by doing the bond episodes and playing with them, you unlock more and more passives, and then you can get like instant activations that do abilities, and you have all kinds of states you can enter, and it gets really cool. I think the only thing that felt weird is it took up until maybe like 75-80% of the game before I finally unlocked them all. So I almost wish, like, the gameplay at the very end, when you have 8 available people you can pull powers from, and you can toggle and switch your face buttons and use those powers together, and as they recharge you get new ones, and if you have high bond, then they'll block attacks for you and you can use instant attacks. That part felt amazing. Like, the combat when using all those powers together felt really good. There were some where you could like see through invisibility, you can become invulnerable, you can like launch fire. The combat's really cool. I just wish that maybe you got more of that sooner, so you get like, maybe at like 50% of the game or 40% of the game, you start getting more of those powers unlocked rather than the end. I think there is a lore and story development reason why they didn't, but I almost feel like the gameplay suffered because of that, because having only a couple powers for most of the game, plus just your auto attack, your regular attacks and charge ups, the game got way better once you had more options available. And maybe that was just me, but I would like to see if I was, whatever, if I had a chance to kind of put an input there, I would bring some of that closer to the middle of the game so that you get that sooner and you'd be able to enjoy that for longer periods of time. The story definitely had the anime style, kind of manga style of lots of craziness going on, like very larger than life, shocking twists and turns and moments and reveals and all that, where I think from a Western perspective, a lot of times it's not as intense as that. So I think it's just a style thing. But I definitely feel like some of the storylines didn't get finished, and maybe this is because they didn't want those to be finished so they can finish those storylines in the anime, and it makes you watch the anime, right? I think there's definitely some business development and business decisions that they made to try and push you towards the anime, right? They made sure that during the game you got very attached to the characters and their storylines, and there's tons of storylines spiraling out, some that never got resolved. Like, they just left wide open, no explanation, no resolution, nothing. And at the end of the game, you're still left wondering. And again, maybe they're just going to explore that in the anime. So I don't know if it was, but it definitely felt kind of jarring to have like all these storylines kick up one after the other, and then all of a sudden, only 1 or 2 of them resolves, and then the other ones are just kind of there, and you're like, okay, why was that information important to me? Why did I have to learn all that and all this? So that's kind of, I think the game probably suffered a little bit from that, but we'll see if it's just, they just want to drive people to the anime. Another thing that felt a little off to me about the game was the pause moments, right? They were called, I forget what they're called. They were all like down phases or something, like pause phases. So it was like a downtime in between each mission. You would have this kind of standby phase where all of you and all your crew would go back to your hideout, and then you just hang out. And so you'd have moments where you just like talk to people, throw darts, chill, and then you go on your bond episodes at this point. So you'd be you know, going off to get food or see the town or talk to each other or, you know, bond together. I'm not going to spoil any of them, but you just, you know, you spend time together with these people, which it makes sense that they want to have these down moments that you can get into the characters, but they continued through the whole game. And even during moments where very serious story development had happened, like world altering story development had happened, and then you just go on pause and you're like, well, the world's ending, but hey, let's go get a coffee, right? It's just, there's this pacing, I think, got broken up quite a lot between the cutscenes and having all these standby phases. There's definitely, I didn't feel as much of a rising action as you would normally in an RPG like this, where you kind of build up to stuff, because it's almost like a sawtooth, right? You build up a little bit and then you pause and you know, go hang out. And then you build up a little bit and then you pause and you go hang out. And then, you know, not going to spoil the story, but like if the Earth blew up and then you were just floating on an asteroid with your friends, and then you're like, hey, does anyone want to go play Smash Brothers, right? It's like, it kind of takes away from your investment in the story a little bit, and the pacing gets thrown off a little bit by doing that. But again, you know, if their metrics of success is focused on getting people to watch the anime, then interstitching that into the gameplay would be the best way to do it. It's just personally for me, subjectively, it felt like the pacing was thrown off by doing that all the time. But yeah, that's Scarlet Nexus for me. I had a great time. There's definitely some times where it felt a little slow or repetitive. It came together at the end. I think the last few sections of the game where you have all your powers unlocked feels really good. And if you can get there and you're kind of really loving the game, definitely recommend it. Final boss was cool and interesting. There's a lot of really cool visuals and vistas and aesthetics you'll go through. I think the world and the art direction felt very cohesive and put well together. And there's some kind of cool twists and turns and story things that surprised me and felt really cool. And yeah, that's kind of my whole thoughts on Scarlet Nexus. Let me know if you guys had different thoughts. If you played the game and really loved it, which character you played it through. I played it through with Yuito, which is one of the two main characters. What they did is they made it so there's two main characters and there's parts of the main story where those characters separate and have their own side stories, and then they come back together for a main story. So you can play through the whole game again as the other character you didn't play, and then you get to see what happened to that character when you separated and they went off and did something else. And then you come back to the main story and then you'll play through those again. So it has some replayability because of that. You can play the other character, but yeah, I mean, that's my thoughts on Scarlet Nexus. That's all I got, man. It was good. It was good. Very, very, very fun, very enjoyable. So if you enjoyed yourself today, leave a like down below. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I'll see you in the next one.